Hey guys, it's Jeremy from Weldtec Designs, and today is going to be a really informative video, so make sure you watch this all the way till the end. Today we are going to be taking this Ford Transit all-wheel drive and we're going to be breaking down the Trail Hero suspension. I want to go over all the parts of it and tell you why each part by itself is important, and combining all of these together, that's what makes this Trail Hero kit. Now keep in mind that each one of these parts are pretty much sold independently, so if the Trail Hero kit is a little bit out of your budget, keep in mind you can start with the basics of this and work your way up all the way to this for your all-wheel drive van. Now I do want to tell you one other thing is if you do have a two-wheel drive van, this will also work for a two-wheel drive van. You can add the spindles to it to get a total of 5 inches, but we're going to be going over all of these components on the all-wheel drive van. So behind me we have a 2022 all-wheel drive Ford Transit. This is going to be the shorter wheelbase and the mid-roof van. So let's talk about some of the basics of this and how this van actually achieves its lift. So typically on this, you're going to have the spacer up on top, and then we're going to have the lower control arm. That's going to be the altitude kit. The lower control arm and the spacer, that's going to give you 2 inches of lift. And the way that we're achieving that spacer is essentially pushing down on that front strut if you still have the factory strut, and that's what's giving you 2 inches of lift. Now we've taken it a step further with the Trail Hero kit, and we've added this 2.5 King coilover. Now this is going to also act as a strut. It's not technically a coilover. It still is a strut because of the way that this mounts. So you can see that the lower portion of this King strut is going to mount in your knuckle, and then it's going to mount up on the top. Now here's the one big thing. If you have a Transit Trail, you're going to have a 2-inch spacer up on the top. If you want to run the Trail Hero kit or even the 2.5 King shock package, it's going to eliminate that spacer up top, and you're going to be able to run just the shock. Now the big benefit in that is going to be getting that little bit longer stroke that you're going to have in the shock. That's a huge benefit, getting that up travel. And as you can see, even on this particular vehicle, I am running a 265. So I know the big thing with the Ford Transit Trail is the recall, because you're getting tire rubbing on that smaller 245. I'm running a 265. There it is on the method wheel. This is a Maxxis tire. This tire is really nice, has a really good sidewall on it. You can see that there is no rubbing or scraping on there. I'm not damaging the tire running that 265 with this setup. So if you're looking to gain a little bit additional height on your Transit Trail, you're able to do that with this shock. Now another big benefit in this shock is you can see that it has this coil spring adjuster on there, and you can see there's about 5 inches of thread on this shock. So what I can actually do is I can loosen up this pinch bolt right here, and I could actually crank this up, bringing this up onto the shock, and what that's going to do is create more lift on the vehicle. So let's say, hey, I want to get another inch of height out of it. I can crank this up and get additional height, which is also going to give me additional clearance for running that larger tire. Another big benefit in this shock is going to be that you're going to have this remote reservoir. This is a piggyback remote reservoir. This is also going to be a nitrogen filled shock. Now that's going to also help keep the shock a lot cooler. And running with this bigger shock, it's going to have a bigger piston. So over those low speed bumps, I really got the opportunity to take this out and hit some trails with it. And those low speed bumps, the washboard roads were just really, really fun with this front setup on there. I did come up on some real big, almost like little G outs, and I actually bottomed out the suspension. So what I'm actually going to do is, you can see in this particular vehicle, I've trimmed back this pinch weld all the way up until the top. I'm actually bottoming out up on the top. So I'm going to trim back that pinch weld even more. And then what is nice is after I hit that, I'm like, ooh, I didn't really like that. So what I instantly did is I came up, and you have a compression adjuster located on the front of this. I was able to just come up, and you can see there's 1 click, 2 click. I'm able to control that compression by just turning the shock. It's that simple. And this shock is going to have 20 clicks of compression adjustment. So what I did is I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go 5 clicks of compression adjustment. And after I did that, I didn't have any more problems bottoming that out. So now I get back onto the road, maybe I don't want it to be that stiff. I can go ahead and loosen it back up. So the shock, I can tune it to depending on the driving style that I want. I get on a windy road, I'm not really worried about it. I might want that suspension tighter, so I might come in and adjust that all the way to reduce the amount of body roll that I'm going to have. You know, some of these mountain roads, you want it to be stiff. You don't want to feel like the vehicle's all over the place. I'm not running a rear sway bar on this as well. We'll talk about all that when we get to the back of this. But for the front of it, that's really important. I like the ability to just simply go and adjust the suspension on the fly, and that is another big benefit in this setup. I do have another option as well. We're running like 150 PSI in the shock. If I felt that the shock was still too soft, I have the ability to add more nitrogen to it, or if I felt that it was overly stiff, I could also let a little bit of nitrogen out of it. So that's a little bit more advanced, but just letting you know some of the options that you're going to have with this 2.5 coilover setup. This just really works well. Now, if you have a van with significant amount of weight to it, you can also change the spring rate in there. So we've messed with spring rates as well to give you the most optimal ride. But if you have a really, really heavy van, we have the ability to also run a heavier coil spring on there to compensate for all the weight that maybe you have added to your van build out. Now let's talk about some of the other components in here as well. We kind of touched on this lower control arm. Now this is what we call the Gen 3 lower control arm. The big benefit in the Gen 3 lower control arm is that this right here is going to be your adjustable caster. So what I can do is I can actually adjust the caster without removing this back bolt. I can turn this, loosen both jam nuts out, and what that would actually do is if I wanted more caster in it, I could loosen it. It's going to push this wheel slightly farther forward. Another big benefit, I want to add caster to it. Maybe I want to take caster away. Well, I can screw it back in, bring this back as well, without having to remove any of the suspension component main hardware. The same thing is going to go with the lower arm. On that lower arm has a camber adjuster, so you can loosen up the 1/2-inch bolts on the bottom and be able to adjust your camber. So if you have a transit trail, you put the shocks on the front of it and the camber is slightly negative or positive, now you're able to adjust your camber or your caster with this lower control arm. So you can see how all of these components work really well together, because we know that we want additional ground clearance. And that is huge, because on the transit trail, they actually just took the whole subframe and dropped it down 2 inches. So you lost some of that really important ground clearance, and we can gain some of that back now by running this 2.5 shock and even adjusting it up and giving you more height. So a lot of really important things going into that. Now, one of the other things that we thought was one of the weak links, I really am not a big fan of the single shear point on this rear pivot. So not a fan of this. So we made this bracket here. What that's gonna do is it's gonna bolt into the factory mounts, as well as going up to the pivot here, making this pivot double shear. We've also added 2 more 3/8 bolts to the back side of the sheet metal to add additional strength, but that's going to be really nice, because I've seen these bolts start to bend, and then what happens is it makes it really difficult to remove them if you need to adjust something, or if you have a factory lower arm and you need to be able to just put a new arm in, because it's cheaper if your bushings go out to just replace the whole arm than it is to put new bushings in it. Now, we will have some other really cool items coming for this, including like a performance sway bar and sway bar system. I'm really excited about that. In the testing of it, it's amazing how this drives with a different sway bar setup. So I'll be excited to talk to you guys more about that in the future. But this is pretty much the whole setup for the Ford Transit. This is the Transit Trail Hero. And this does work on the all-wheel drive, the Transit Trail, and the two-wheel drive. Some little bit different parts, but just to keep it simple. Now, we didn't stop in the front. We also have a lot of really nice components in the rear. So let's head to the back of this. All right, so we have moved to the back of this Ford Transit Trail Hero kit. And I just want to make sure that I tell you guys, we are running that Method 703, and I am running a 265 75 16 Maxxis tire. These both are a great combination and love them. Big thanks to Method and Maxxis for supporting this build. So as we come to the back of this, we're gonna have our leaf spring setup. Now, what's really nice about this leaf spring setup is we can configure it to the weight of your vehicle. So typically, this right here would be great for a van that you've added 1,200 to 1,800 pounds in your build out. This spring setup is going to work really well. Now, I personally still have an empty van, and I really want this more, I want the articulation, I like the high speed stuff, I like going fast. So what I've actually done is I have removed my platform spring and 2 other springs just to lighten up the rear of this until I start building out the inside of my van. Now, I'm looking for you guys for information. I love seeing some of your guys' build out. So if you have a really cool Ford Transit build out, send us some pictures. I'd love to see what you have going on. So this spring pack is really nice. And now the big benefit is this is just going to be a normal straight cut spring. It's not the parabolic springs that typically come in the Transit. And the idea is that this is going to give you more articulation because of the amount of arc in the spring. If you have a Transit Trail and you are running a 2-inch block, you can eliminate the 2-inch block from the rear of it and just run the progressive springs. It has the lift built into it. So that's going to be really nice. Now, the next part of this is going to be the shock setup. So we love those 2.5 shocks, and with the heavier van build outs, we want that bigger piston and more oil to be able to control the ride without getting shock fade. We know that you want to be able to get off grid. You want to be able to go camping away from everybody else, and that's a big part of this. So we're running that 2.5, and we're also running that remote reservoir. Now, it's not a piggyback reservoir. What it's going to do is it's going to mount up there in that inner wheel well. Now, what's really nice about this is it's going to give you the easy adjustability or easy access to be able to adjust this, because we are going to have the compression adjuster on the rear. So you could see right here, obviously with the tire off, it's really easy to get in and adjust this and add more compression to this rear shock. Now, the big benefit in this is as well is this remote reservoir also acts as a double shear mount for your Transit Trail shock mount. So this 1/4-inch plate that's mounted to the side of it uses 2 additional bolts as well as the shock bolt to support that and give it more strength up on the top, because we don't want that shock mount getting wallowed out because the sheet metal on the Ford Transit is just so thin. Now, the next thing we've done is the high clearance shock brackets. So as you can see, a lot of the Ford Transits, the lower shock mounts hang really low. So what this is going to do is it's going to raise up that lower shock bracket and also give you a lot more support on the bottom here for running this 2.5 shock. So these are all the little things. Now, keep in mind, each one of these components can be bought by itself independently, but these are all the components that are going to come in the Trail Hero kit. One other thing to keep in mind is if you're going to do a kit like this on your van, we will most likely need to align your drive shaft so that you don't get any hum. So typically we're running like a 2-inch drive shaft spacer in here as well, because you'll notice the drive shafts are actually ridiculously short in these. You know, Ford's infinite wisdom, not sure why they didn't make this main drive shaft longer. It would have been really nice, and seems like it would have been really simple. But of course, what do I know? I'm just a silly guy that builds van suspension. So the rear suspension setup on this is really nice. This isn't running a rear sway bar, so there's no reason to run sway bar links. And because it's so light, I don't feel the need for one. I think that I can control it all in the shock as well, and that's going to be a big benefit. I'm not running a sumo spring, I'm not running an airbag. I'm able to control everything in that shock. I'm easily able to make it stiffer. Now, even if you made the shock all the way to its stiffest position and it still wasn't enough, the ride wasn't there, these shocks can always be rebuilt or revalve. So that's the big benefit in these King 2.5 shocks. Most likely you're never buying another pair of shocks for your vehicle again. Well, there it is. That is a rundown of the Trail Hero package from Weldtec Designs. Of course, if you're interested in it and would like more information, maybe you would even like to go for a test drive, reach out to us at info@Weldtec Designs or on social media. We'd love to take you for a ride so you can really experience the difference that this Ford Transit Trail Hero suspension is going to make on your van. If you have any more questions, that's what that comment section is for down below. Let us know what we could help you with, or even what you would like us to talk about in future videos. My name is Jeremy, this is Weldtec Designs, and this is the Trail Hero. I look forward to seeing you guys on the trail.